Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. My name is Nadia Mozafar. I'm an attorney at Juvenile Law Center, and we're just going to give people just a couple more minutes to join, and we will start in a couple minutes. Good morning again, and thank you to everyone for joining our webinar this morning. As I mentioned before, my name is Nadia Mozafar. I am a staff attorney at Juvenile Law Center, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Jennifer Pakempner, and also joining us hopefully a little bit later this morning, will be Marissa Myers from the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice. Our webinar today is to give a little bit of an introduction for a new publication that was released last week called Supporting Higher Education Access for Youth with Experience in Foster Care, a guide for child welfare and education professionals. So throughout the webinar today, we are going to give you a brief introduction on this guide and how to use it and show a little bit about how it looks like, and we hope that this will be a really useful tool for everyone who is working with young people in the foster care system, helping them meet their college goals. Just a couple of technical details. This webinar session is being recorded. If you have any questions about technical issues or other questions, you can put them in the chat box in the screen, and then we will spend a few minutes taking questions at the end of our presentation today, and we'll also be providing our contact information. So if you have questions after the fact, or if you're listening to a recorded version of this, you can feel free to reach out to us with those questions. With that, we will go ahead and get started. So first, I just wanted to start with an introduction to the guide. The Higher Education Guide really is a resource that provides information on how to leverage key laws and resources to support higher education matriculation and success for young people in the foster care system. So we know that there's a lot of very helpful guides out there that walk the average young person through picking out a college or so many questions around college. And what our guide seeks to do is supplement that by providing the resources and information that's very specific to what a young person with experience in the foster care system would need. And the guide is broken up into 4 parts. The first part is supports that are available in the foster care system. The second part focuses on a lot of college and campus-based supports. especially in Pennsylvania. We have so many interesting and helpful things that are being done by colleges around the state that we want to highlight. The third section focuses on financial aid, and the fourth section talks about community-based supports. And so in every section of the guide highlights laws, resources, and practice tips. So very quickly, before we go into the other pieces of this, I just wanted to give a quick highlight of what the guide looks like. So when you click on our link, which I've provided in the PowerPoint, it will take you to the home page or the introduction page of the guide. And it starts off with a introduction, a little bit of information about the background of why we did this project and why we think this is important. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. So first, on the side view, you can see there's a big sidebar on the right side of your screen, and that is where you can click on each of the chapters and just, if there's one subject that you're specifically looking for information on, you can click on that. The other thing I want to highlight is at the bottom of every chapter, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is information of there is the possibility to download things. So although we're providing this information in a web-based form, there's also the ability to download the full guide, or you can download individual chapters. So hopefully that will be useful in case somebody wants to print out a resource and give it to a young person, or just have a hard copy of it. And that is a basic navigation of the site. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, who is going to speak about part one, the important resources and supports from the child welfare system. And while she's talking, I will just have the screen up on that page so you can get a better idea of what a specific chapter looks like. So Jenny, on to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Nadia. And thanks everyone for joining today. We're really excited to have this guide. And as Nadia said, this guide is really for you all who are on the phone, something to help you as you're working with young people. At the end of the webinar, we'll tell you a little bit about our Know Your Rights guide, which also was released, which is more targeted at youth directly. So we're hoping, you can use this in companion with the Know Your Rights guide, but this is really for you guys. So we hope that this meets your needs. And Nadia said, part one is really about how do you utilize the resources in the child welfare system to support youth as they go into higher education and training, and also helping them succeed. So this chapter focuses on kind of four main areas. The first, really giving you guys a summary of what are these services we call transition to adulthood services. They start at 14 and continue as a users in the system and after they leave. And we provide some tips of how you can utilize that obligation to really help with you going to college, thinking about college training, and then succeeding there, because a lot of those transition to adulthood services are exactly the things that can help them with getting ready to college tours, helping prepare for SATs, ACTs, all sorts of things, and even just skill building that will get them ready to be in higher education. The second really big issue that we focus on in this section is about extended foster care and reentry into foster care. And this gives you a lot of information about who's eligible, and definitely any youth who's continuing their education is eligible. And we provide a lot of details for you all, and many of you on the call I know this, but how crucial being in extended care can be for helping a youth make their way through college. So, things that a lot of people bring out are, it really helps in providing funds for your living arrangement, support for case management, having people around you that are supportive of you. But one of the things that we really do encourage and ask you guys to help with in this chapter is that often making sure youth can go to college and be in extended foster care in a way that works for them requires some advocacy. So you can go away to college out of state and still be in extended foster care, but sometimes your support is needed to make sure that that is really pushed for. And then discharge planning, when youth are leaving the system, making sure the plan is a really good one is something that can really help with higher education success and support. And so this gives you some tips on how to leverage that legal obligation to provide a good plan for youth to help support their higher education aspirations. And then finally, aftercare services. Youth in Pennsylvania can get aftercare services until 23 now, and that can be really helpful when they're in college. It can be helpful with providing, some material support, sometimes room and board assistance for housing, and then sometimes just case management and kind of navigation and connection support. So those are kind of the five main areas. Again, we really encourage you to use this information to help the youth, get all they need so that they can move on to college or training and have the support, and hope this information will help you be proactive with them in that advocacy. Nadia, I'll turn it back over to you for part two.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Part two talks about college-based supports or campus-based support systems. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there's a lot of different guides out there that help young people narrow down what college choice would be right for them. And so here, one of the things that we encourage this audience, people who work with young people, to think about is when a young person is picking a college, there are many colleges that offer campus-based support programs or other programs that are specifically targeted towards young people in foster care. And, that's something that like a guide that is just targeting a broad swath of people might not focus on. But as young people with experience in foster care are looking to decide where to go to college, looking for colleges with some of these support programs or some of these resources might be a good place to start and might be particularly helpful for them. So Pennsylvania, right now, we know a lot of campuses are doing really great programming for young people, specifically directed to helping ease barriers for young people with experience in foster care. So we provide a list of those colleges and some tips on how to get involved in campus-based support programs, specifically discussing things like contacting the point of contact at colleges and reaching out to them, developing relationships with them, and encouraging encouraging those who work with young people to build these relationships as well. So when a young person has a question about a college or has a question about a program, that you can serve as a resource because you can connect them to the point of contact. So there's information about campus support programs. There's information about reaching out to points of contact at Pennsylvania colleges, and a reminder that now under the new tuition waiver bill, the Fostering Independence Through Education bill, all colleges in Pennsylvania are required to have at least one point of contact, maybe even more, and developing relationships with these point of contact early on and can help a young person get application help, can help a young person get financial aid help. And so building these relationships are really important. And this guide also talks about other campus-based support programs that may not be targeted towards young people in the foster care system, but will likely help a lot of people. So for example, federal and state programs such as the Act 101 program, the TRIO program, they are targeted towards different young people from financially or otherwise disadvantaged backgrounds that we know that a lot of the young people who are in the foster care system would meet that criteria and can have support from there as well. And finally, we also include a section on disability services, especially how to get accommodations from at the campus level, at the college level, which is different from how one gets accommodations or disability services in high school. So providing resources on that. And so as I mentioned, in every chapter, we kind of go through a list of resources, and then we end with some very specific practice tips. And in the college and campus-based support program, we provide tips on how to connect youth with these services, and then how to continue to check up on them as they're in college, as they're going through their classes and their life in college, how to continue this connection with them so they know about these support programs. Great. So next, part 3 is about financial aid. And Marissa, I will turn this piece over to you.
Awesome. So hopefully everyone can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had a little bit of technical difficulties in the beginning. My name is Marissa Myers, and I'm a practitioner researcher at the Hope Center for College Community and Justice at Temple. And in terms of financial aid, this is, I think, one of the most confusing pieces in terms of foster youth going to college. I want to start by saying when we talk about financial aid here, we are talking about funding for higher education, and that covers tuition, room and board, books, fees, but it's important to think about other types of financial needs that any college student has, but especially with foster youth or former foster youth, and thinking about childcare, transportation, things that may not be covered in some of the financial aid packages. And I know a lot of people that are child advocates or case managers. This is not, they didn't go to school and study how to, fill out the FAFSA for youth that have been in foster care. So I think it's a very complex process, and things are constantly changing. So it's just important to really keep up to date with what is going on currently. And in terms of the FAFSA, I think that's one of the easiest things, right? Not in terms of filling it out, but in terms of knowing what to do. That's typically the first step for anyone that's applying to college, is to fill out that FAFSA. It's important for young people to know that they are in foster care. It might sound a little silly, and many of you on the phone have probably heard me say this before, but as a former foster youth, when I was filling out the FAFSA, because I was in group home placements, I didn't consider myself a foster youth because I didn't have foster parents. So when I was asked the questions about foster care on the FAFSA, I said no, and I missed out on an opportunity. I'm still a little bitter about that, and perhaps that's why I always feel the need to bring it up, because I don't want other students to also miss out on that opportunity. It gets a little complicated when you're thinking about the age. So the question asks if you've ever been in foster care after the age of 13. It's important to know that it's 13 in terms of the FAFSA when you're thinking about students being independent versus dependent, but that's a different story when you're thinking about Chafee, which is 16 years old. So that's just an important difference to note, that you might be eligible on the FAFSA to be independent, but that doesn't mean that you are eligible for Chafee funds. It's important to get students to fill out the FAFSA as early as possible, and that's also for school-based funds. So, for example, FSEOG funds, you want to make sure that students are filling that out as early as possible so that they can get as much financial aid as possible. So I'm not going to go over all the different types of loans and financial aid and things like that, but I think it's important to go through and understand what each of these things mean, especially to someone who has been in the foster care system. We would say to always try to discourage young people from taking out private loans because they have high interest rates, and to take advantage of things like work study, any types of scholarships, and especially the tuition waiver in Pennsylvania, and to really think about what are their additional needs, right? So if you have a child, what does that look like? Are you eligible for SNAP benefits? And I know Jenny is going to talk a little bit about that next, but to think about not just financial aid in terms of paying for college, but also for paying for all those other needs that the young person might have. So, walking a student through this process is super important, just with tax paperwork and understanding the questions. The FAFSA is not easy to understand for anyone, especially for someone who has a lot of different exceptions to the rule. So say go through it as early as possible with a young person. On this guide, there is a way to look at the application as a whole instead of doing it online. So print that out, go through each of the questions, and make sure that the young person has an understanding of what all of these things mean. If you look through the guide, you'll also see that there are some resources for scholarships, as well as different areas and organizations that might be able to help a young person fill out their FAFSA and financial paperwork if they need some help and support there. So again, checking in with youth about their budget and finances, understanding what their needs are, and going over this stuff as early and often as possible. And the last thing I just want to say in terms of financial aid is the biggest challenge we see with young people in foster care at the Hope Center is that they have someone helping them to fill out this form the first year, or when they're transitioning from high school to college, or if they're just re-entering into the college system, then that stops. And so, a young person might think, okay, I filled this out the first year, that means I'm good to go and I don't need to do that again. It's important to check back in with that person, or at least have a warm handoff. So if you know that, my relationship with this young person ends at 21, they are not in the system anymore, who am I going to trust to make sure that this young person is going to be able to fill out the paperwork, for years moving forward. And so if there is a single point of contact at that college and university, which in theory there should be, but we also know that mandates aren't always followed as well as we would hope. So making sure that person at least has some kind of connection and someone to walk them through these things so that they don't miss out on that opportunity or miss a checked box and not be able to receive financial aid in the future. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jenny to talk about part 4.
Great. Thanks, Martha.
Jenny, to start, I just wanted to add one quick point.
Sure.
Is that now at this time, as many of you know, the Pennsylvania new tuition waiver law is going to go into effect in this fall, and as we continue to get more information on how the waiver is working in practical terms, how kids can access to it, any concerns we're seeing, any tips on how to ensure that a young person gets access to this waiver, we are going to try to keep part 3 of the guide kind of updated with that information, and it already includes some of the information we've gathered in the last few months. So please, as you're looking for information about the tuition waiver, this will be one place where it can be. All right, Jenny, now over to you.
Great. No, and that's a great point, because I think one of the things, we wanted to give you all kind of introduction to the guide and what's in it, but I think when we talk about what can you do right now during the summer, there's a ton you can do in terms of meeting with young people and going over some of these things, but probably one of the most important is making sure the Chafee application is filled out, because that we do know is kind of the pathway to the tuition waiver. And as Marissa said, completing the FAFSA, those are definitely really concrete things that, if you're thinking of what can I do with young people now, today, tomorrow, those are definitely things that will be kind of gateways to a lot of the other things we have in the guide, and are things that I think are possible to do. And as Marissa said, a lot of these things are complicated. We hope the guide gives you kind of the tools to be able to know what needs to be done and get help to do it if you feel like it's kind of over your head or you need a little more, because a lot of this stuff is complicated and it's over a lot of our heads, and it's kind of the issue spotting that we want you guys to be on board with, so that if you can't do something, you can get someone to help the young person do it. But again, going to part 4, I think like Marissa said it very well, that when we want to think about financial assistance, one of the big ticket items is that kind of rubric of financial aid that is applied through the FAFSA, through the tuition waiver, Chafee. Those things are so important. But there's also a lot of other expenses and also ways to get assistance to help make ends meet for a young person. And probably many of you who are working with youth who are in college, or if they're not, have probably been acutely aware of as they get older, of how they're learning and understanding, as we all are, how these costs, food, childcare, as Marissa mentioned, books, all these things that really we need to make sure young people understand and get help with, because if they don't have them, it really can make the plan, whether it be education or employment, not go as well as possible. So this chapter, part of the guide, really helps to either remind you or help you learn about some of the assistance that young people can tap into, either through the county or state or in the community. And so you all have heard, and it's unfortunately, not just for youth in care, but a lot of college students really are food insecure. And that's something we really do want to make sure we address as we're planning with youth. So the guide attempts to give you some different ways of addressing that issue. Looking on campus for some supports. Many schools have been proactive about this, things like meal swipe programs, also food pantries on campus, but also gives you resources about how you look in the community for things like food banks and food pantries. And then it moves on to talk a little bit about some of the public benefits, whether it be cash assistance for a parent through TANF, or WIC or SNAP food stamps, and tells you some of the rules around those things. Because again, I think a young person, particularly at this age when they're entering school, they really do need to piece together, unfortunately, a lot of resources to make ends meet. And this, we hope, gives you some of the tools to help them do that and help them be proactive so that you don't wait till a crisis to kind of figure out how to apply for SNAP, that you're already kind of helping ask those questions and helping them find resources to kind of address those issues. And then the third big section, this chapter, is about health insurance and health care. All of us know that young people in foster care often have a lot of special health care and maybe behavioral health needs. And that's just something to be aware of. I mean, health insurance is important for all young people at any age, but also paying special attention to how important having that coverage is, and also making sure that providers are identified for youth. And taking into account things like if they're staying in the county they're in, maybe they don't need to change a provider, but if they are going to college, the other part of the state or out of state, really hashing out those questions. Because I think the couple of things that many of us have seen, and probably you all on the call have seen, is that young people in general, often aren't as attuned to like preparing and thinking about insurance. And that was the case for all of us. And so really do need to be talking about that before a young person goes away to college. But we've also seen how the transition to college can be really disruptive, destabilizing. It really can be challenging for all young people, and how making sure they have things like health insurance if they need behavioral health services, health insurance if there are any challenges with their health that they didn't have so far but do come up, that doesn't become a crisis, and then it becomes something that you can help them manage. So the guide tries to give you kind of the information about most youth who are aging out should be eligible for Medicaid until 26. And if they're not, and in Pennsylvania, there should be a lot of access to Medicaid. So that's kind of where we start. But then it also helps you kind of navigate things like, okay, you're going to college in another state. What does it mean for your health insurance if it's in Pennsylvania or in another county? So again, tries to help you spot an issue and give you some of the information so you can address the issue. But again, we don't want you to be overwhelmed by it. We want you to, like, if this is like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with all the intricacies of health insurance, but now you'll know it's an issue. So then you can get help from our office, from Health Law Project, if you need it. But hopefully this will help you kind of get out in front on this with a young person, so you can help with those planning to have those things in place. So that's the focus of part 4, and we hope that all these parts kind of give you all a way to help, navigate this process with young people and provide support. But again, don't have it overwhelm you. It's meant to be a tool that helps you both help the youth, but also get help from us, your colleagues, so that you really can assist young people in getting into college and also being successful as they work their way through. And I'll turn it back over to you, Nadia.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. And that brings us to kind of the end of the substantive part of our webinar. And I know we are at time at 11:30. So what we wanted to do really with this webinar is just give you an introduction to this guide and to highlight for you how the ways are that you can use it. And so we really encourage everyone to look through the guide, look through the different chapters and the resources that are available. And we are happy. I'm putting our email addresses on the screen. And so as you look through the guide, if you have any additional questions or things that you would like us to to discuss, we're always happy and available to do that. So please let us know your thoughts as you review the guide. It's already 11:31, so I think that maybe if there's, maybe we have time for one question if anyone wants to put anything in the chat box, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. But otherwise, like I said, we're available for questions via email.
And Nadia, can I just say one closing thing? Because I mentioned the Know Your Rights Guide. Thanks. So, as I said, this guide was really intended for you guys who are on the call, child welfare professionals, advocates, higher education professionals and advocates, so that you could use it with young people. We also released, I think 2 weeks ago, our Know Your Rights Guide, which that audience is young people, and there is two education chapters that focus on kind of getting to graduation in high school and moving on to higher education and training. And we'll be doing a webinar kind of going through that guide. Both of them are web-based, but what we would recommend is that this is a guide kind of you all can use. You can print out for yourself, but then know that if you're kind of working with a young person and want to print out some materials, the Know Your Rights Guide is written in a more kind of youth-friendly manner and was intended for that purpose. So just wanted to alert you to that in terms of maybe being able to use those as companion pieces, so that you didn't feel like you were printing out something that maybe a young person that it might be not as kind of youth-friendly. So definitely wanted to make that available to you all, and we'll be doing that webinar on June 18th.
And Jenny, if I could just add, Marissa, just to add one other thing. I know we're at time, but I just wanted to mention that for many of you guys on the phone, it's probably confusing if you have a young person who is in permanent legal custodianship or PLC'd. I know PLC confuses me often, or if they were adopted or in kinship care. And so, just to take a look through this guide and look at that piece by piece, because that is, I think, one of the most confusing parts about this is when did the young person leave care and what are they eligible for, and what does leaving care mean, and what does it look like for folks who are adopted or PLC. So that to me is one of the most useful pieces of this guide, because it is so confusing when you think about what young people are eligible for, and I think it's laid out in a pretty concise way. So I would definitely encourage everyone to take a look at that for your young people.
Thank you both, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Like I said, please let us know if you have any questions, and otherwise I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and this is a useful tool for everyone. Thank you.